we have to get now into deeper waters. Saudi Arabia has become the 166th country in the world to ratify the Kigali Amendment on the 10th of September. And I would like to briefly go into what that means to the industry, what this means to the country, and what we are looking forward to. The Kigali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol is an international agreement which mandates to gradually phase down the consumption of hydrofluorocarbons, so-called HFCs, which form the vast majority of refrigerants in use in this market across the cooling and refrigeration sector. It is a legally binding agreement designed to create rights and obligations in international law. The HFC phase-down schedule means that countries are assigned different timelines to phase down their production and consumption of HFCs. The official phase-down started for developed nations already back in 2019, with Europe being a little bit earlier even than with 2016 with the first F-gas regulation to start this phase-down of HFCs. The GCC and Saudi Arabia belong to the last group of countries which are obligated to start this phase-down then with a baseline freeze in 2028 and phasing down onwards from 2032. If we look at the bigger picture, all the big production hubs for ventilation, air conditioning, and refrigeration, Japan, Korea, China, Turkey, Europe, and the United States have already implemented, ratified the Kigali Amendment, started their phase-down or are about to start their phase-down. This will change significantly the offerings of products on the market. When we take a closer look to how this timeline works for the GCC countries, we see here that we have a baseline freeze in 2028, then a first 10% reduction of HFCs which can be placed on the market by 2032, then another 10% reduction in 2037, another one in 2042, until by 2047 it will drop significantly down to only 15% of what the baseline has been established. And this usually looks to people, okay, we have time, it's not that dramatic. However, we need to understand what this baseline actually means. The baseline is calculated on the average annual tons of HFCs consumed or produced across a 3-year period from 2024 to 2026. And it's measured in CO2 equivalents. I will not go into the CO2 equivalents here. This is a different matter. It is relevant, but for the sake of this presentation, let me not dive deeper into that. But now we have to understand why we have to act now. So again, the baseline freeze will come in 2028. However, it is based on the annual average consumption and production of HFCs from 2024 to 2026. And the problem is economic growth. Saudi Arabia is currently growing in its HVAC industry with an annual consolidated growth rate from between 4 to 8%. So if we assume an average of 6% annually, that means by the time we freeze the baseline, the market has grown by already 12%. So we are 12% higher than what the baseline actually stipulates. Now, if we go to 2032, when this first step of reduction will happen, that means that we not only look at a 10% reduction, we also have to add to that the additional accumulated growth from now on until 2032. So that means by that time, we may look at a reduction of more than 30–40% of HFCs available to this market in 2032. These are 7 years from now on, and 7 years mean less than half the lifespan of a chiller. And this is the reason why we need to start acting now. We need to understand that every project we are putting online today, based on HFC refrigerants, will experience a different situation not even halfway through its life cycle. And these effects are, we will see shortages of supply once we take the first step of reduction. Shortages always mean rising prices. With rising prices, you usually also encounter the influx of counterfeit products, which also pose a safety hazard. And leaking and venting, intentional venting of refrigerants will become a very expensive exercise. On the positive side, it will make recycling of refrigerants profitable, which will allow us and mandate us to actually start in introducing active refrigerant management. We have to see that the HFCs which we have in the market, that they are recuperated, recycled, and put back into our system in order to avoid even tighter shortages. And another bottleneck which we will face is the lack of qualified personnel. In order to recycle and recuperate refrigerants, fixing the leaks, we need qualified personnel. We need a huge push in upskilling to make sure that our service technicians, our installers, know how to do that correctly. So how can we avoid this bottleneck which we see coming to us in the future, in the next 7 years? We need to see that we transition now wherever is possible. So every project needs to consider if it's already easy to do or simple to do and possible to do, to move away from HFCs in order to depressurize the market and take demand a little bit down. And the next is that we need to start now to qualify our workforce. It will take a couple of years in order to introduce the right systems, the right environment, the right schemes to train and qualify and certify our workforce. Eurovent Middle East will release next week the first edition of our position paper on the refrigerant transition. It will contain recommendations to the industry and to governments how to avoid coming into a situation that in the mid-30s we will have huge demand for HFCs because we have not changed early in time enough, to avoid a situation where we cannot provide the supply which we would need. We will come back to this position paper later when we have our first panel discussion. And you will see left and right announcements coming up. There is also an announcement of the position paper with a QR code which you can scan and download directly to your mobile phone. This position paper has been enabled by the joint work of our members. For those of you who are not familiar with Eurovent Middle East yet, we are the region's industry association of leading HVACR manufacturers, distributors, service providers, and related organizations. And it is this combined expertise and competence from our members which enable us to sit together and think ahead and predict what is about to come in the future and make recommendations and provide guidance to the market. We would like to invite all of you who are interested to put their time and their energy into a joint collaboration to improve the market, to help people, companies, but also governments and countries to improve, to join us, to reach out to us. Subscribe to our social media channels, stay in touch, stay informed, because when it's about the refrigerant transition, the first step, which is absolutely important, is to get and stay informed. We are very active on LinkedIn with announcements. We have a newsletter which you can subscribe to. We will also put the recordings of this conference up to our YouTube channel, so you find us on all the social media channels, always under the hashtag Eurovent.me or Eurovent Middle East.